Welcome to the State House Library, this beautiful venue for this event today. First, I want to thank our staff at the Rhode Island Department of State for coordinating this. Lauren Fogarty, Faith Chabowski have worked incredibly hard to make sure this event takes place. And thank you for accommodating our venue change. For nearly 30 years, I was a U.S. history teacher at East Providence High School, Advanced Placement U.S. and Civics and Government, but I was also an athletic administrator in the final years of my career. But those two careers did not intersect until today, where I had to make a decision on weather, which is unique. And I'm glad we did. It's very cold outside and very windy. It would have been nice to commemorate this event at the actual location, but this is the next best option. As we kick off Women's History Month as well, it's great to be here in this library where we're reminded of some of the trailblazing women who have led the way in achieving elected office. And I hope you'll take a moment to check out the display in the back of the room before you leave today. Again, as a former history teacher, I enjoy the opportunity to highlight some of Rhode Island's lesser known history. And the Providence Tea Party is a great example. And as the chair of the RI 250 Commission, I know that Rhode Island has a revolutionary story to tell. The RI 250 Commission is committed to telling all of Rhode Island's stories, even those that have gone untold. I'm especially honored to be doing so alongside such an impressive, accomplished, and impactful group of civically engaged women, just like the women of the Providence Tea Party in 1775. These women, as they were known for their commitment and advocacy and for honoring their heritage, tradition, and the state's history. I would like to acknowledge our living history participants here today. First, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Thank you for all being here. And I do have an acknowledgement card so we don't skip anybody. So the Daughters of the American Revolution and Ann Harrigan, who is the state regent. We have the former state regent here as well, Amanda Lazarus. You could welcome Amanda. We have the Children of the American Revolution, the state president, Christy Head, who I met when I came in. Christy is there, thank you. We also have Alan from the Sons of the American Revolution, who I also met, I'm sure, when I came in. And we have the Patuxent Rangers represented here today. Thank you, as always, for being here. We had a wonderful day yesterday visiting the Rhode Island Historical Society, the John Brown House, where there was tremendous reenactment going on, tremendous conversation. I'm not going to acknowledge the Tories in the room because they do not want to be exposed, so we'll pass on that. Excuse me. With all that said, I'm thrilled that we're here today to commemorate the Providence Tea Party, and I'll start our program off with Dr. Morgan Greff. She is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Historical Society. More importantly, she's my favorite Rhode Island historian. And I'm sure we'll all gain some knowledge here today. Thank you, Dr. Greff.
Thank you, Secretary Moy, and thank you all for being here today. And looking out at this room, seeing the myriad ways in which we all recognize and celebrate and commemorate Rhode Island's tremendous history. And this is really, in many ways, just the beginning for our 250th. While, of course, a couple of years ago, we recognized the Gaspé, this begins in earnest our conversation about the 250th. And so we are delighted to be with all of you today, even if we can't be outside or really burning anything. So my charge today is to talk a bit about what happened 250 years ago today and why it happened. So on March 1st, 1775, the prohibition in the American colonies against tea consumption began. At 5 p.m. on March 2nd, the local Daughters of Liberty hosted a tea party of sorts to mark the occasion and build public support for the revolutionary cause. So what happens here is that this prohibition is created, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. But on March 2nd at noon, and we're going to keep your ears open for noon, the town crier takes to the streets, imploring, quote, all true friends of their country, all lovers of freedom, all haters of shackles and handcuffs, to bring their tea to throw into a fire of some quantity of India tea, which they called a needless herb, which for long time hath been highly detrimental to our liberty, our interest, and our health. At 5 p.m., the church bells tolled, and large crowds gathered to see some 300 pounds of tea burn near Market Square. Attendees did indeed bring small quantities of tea to include in the fire. Also included in that fire were the speeches of Lord North. Loyalist newspapers and sundry other things were tossed into this fire that represented a break with the old regime and a move towards liberty. A spirited son of liberty with a brush and lampblack went along the streets removing tea from all signs on the street. In the press, the event was further sensationalized by the anthropomorphizing of tea itself, and the event was stated to be a funeral. Now I'm quoting. Please remember that. She was a native of China, and after traveling into several parts of Europe where she found great notice among the great and luxurious, she took a trip to America. She came into this country about 40 years ago and hath been greatly caressed by all ranks. She lived in reputation for several years, but at length became a common prostitute among the lower class of people. She became very poor, and her price was so lowered that anyone might have her company for almost nothing. The quality deserted her, and by hard living in log houses and wigwams, her health was impaired. Broken spirits and hysterics seized her, and she died on 1st of March, 1775, at midnight. Thus was Providence's Tea Party, a funeral for a woman they called Madame Souchon, and it was the birth of a revolution. This raucous event was one of many throughout the colonies, many of which were organized by women, who in fact had been organizing political protests and boycotts since the Stamp Act some 10 years earlier. But why were they boycotting tea in the first place? For that, we must turn south to the Continental Association of 1774, often known as the Articles of Association. First formed in Virginia when Lord Duntmore disbanded the House of Burgesses, this group really took power in the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia in 1774, September and October. An October meeting, on October 20th in fact, with 12 colonies in attendance, only Georgia was absent. They met to discuss how to respond to the increased British oppression in the form of what were commonly called the intolerable or coercive acts. The association called for a boycott of British goods, of which tea was considered to be one, an embargo on exports to begin on September 10th, 1775, so you had a little bit of lead time, almost 11 months, a ban on the slave trade, the condemnation of those who violated the agreement, and a plan to publish the names in the newspaper of all those who violated this agreement. This would go into effect unless Parliament repealed the act by December 1st, 1774. Colonial leaders hoped that they would change British policy towards them. They did not. It is important to note that we were, of course, represented at this affair. One of those people present was Stephen Hopkins. Hopkins, as we know, was a Quaker, but that didn't apparently affect his determination that the revolution would be necessary. It is reported that at this event, when speaking to Paul Revere, he said, "Those who indulge this opinion that the boycott would be enough, I think you deceive yourselves. Powder and ball will decide this question. The gun and bayonet alone will finish the contest in which we are engaged. And any of you who cannot bring your minds to this mode of adjusting the question had better retire in time, as it will not, perhaps, be in your power after the first blood shall have been shed." Unfortunately, Hopkins was correct. The boycott was not enough to change British sentiments, but that doesn't mean that it was not incredibly important. What happened here was happening all throughout the colonies. Some of them in the South in particular started even earlier. So as soon as the intolerable comes out, places like acts come out in Virginia, in the Carolinas, they start taking action. They start boycotting tea locally. We can see this if you ever had the chance to go down to Williamsburg and you pop into the shop of one William Prentice. There you can purchase, in fact, what they call Prentice Apology tea. Now, I will admit I purchased Prentice Apology tea because my husband is a Prentice, And because his father is named William Prentice, and I thought it was really funny. But in fact, here was the case, one of the first cases we see of exactly what they were talking about here. Tea had come to shore, and John Prentice, at that point, who was the proprietor, sold this tea against the boycott. He was forced, some say, persuaded, to publish in the newspaper a written apology for the temerity that he showed in bringing that tea and then trying to sell that tea. So how do the ladies get involved? In many ways, we see the first action of women in this period really down in the Carolinas. So what's called the Edenton Tea Party is really the first attempt we see at that moment, as we see women not burning tea at that point, but making a proclamation saying that they will no longer drink tea. They will no longer participate, and they sign their names to this. And people questioned whether or not this was wise for these women who were well connected to be doing such an action. Other women who had perhaps slightly less power take different kinds of solemn approaches as well, and we see in Wilmington an early tea burning that happens. And we see this kind of tea burning happening. So not the Tea Party in Boston, which is again a reaction to slightly different. The Intolerable Act's a reaction to the Boston Tea Party, right? And so we see these smaller local actions as serving a fundamental, important role here. And that is, what they needed was local support for this very, very revolutionary idea that was being put forward. And what was the best way to do that? It was to call for local action. So women in this period were frequently blamed for a lot of the excessive spending and consumption of the period of British luxury goods. They were often, as well, drinking a fair amount of the tea that was out there and available, right? So we know that women are socially engaged in tea drinking. This is a big part of the culture. There is furniture that is developed for these purposes, decorative arts. And so this is a huge part of the social life of women. And so many of the people involved felt that it was crucial to disrupt women's behavior and get women on board to show the strength of this boycott. So there were many women who became committed to liberty, to wearing homespun, to plain clothes, to less shopping, recognizing in this early period that consumption and consumerism is a political act. Just as with the Stamp Act, women began suggesting the use of local aromatics and tasty herbs that could be grown locally in place of drinking tea. They hosted spinning bees, during which they would spin linen and wool. They would drink coffee, and apparently here, mostly rum. And what would be on the docket are political discussions about liberty, about how they could be engaged, about how they could support these acts that were going on up and down the coast. They would forgo ribbons, they would forgo frills, they would forgo new clothes. And some of them, yes, in fact, would burn tea. Now, to be clear, the boycott on tea was always about more than people drinking tea in their homes. There really weren't local committees going into people's houses and ferreting out who was having a cup of bohea tea in the morning. This was really about what's happening at public gatherings, what's happening in public spaces. So this is about how we're presenting our unified front against British goods. And women, again, are at the forefront of this. And in Providence, as I said, on March 1st, they take one of these, they know about the prohibition coming into place, and March 2nd, they participate in one of the final acts of tea burning that we see as part of these tea parties. Between October 1774 and spring of 1775, British imports fell to about 7% of their previous value. Some 7,000 colonists served on local enforcement committees that monitored whether or not people were tea drinking, whether or not they were signing the Articles of Association and participating, whether or not they were actually doing and living up to this boycott. And in the spring of 1774, Parliament responded to the association by prohibiting most of the colonies from trading with any other nations. This was known as the Restraining Act. But so much for the association and so much for the restraint. Violence was at our doorstep, and by April, boycotting tea was no longer top of mind, and local enforcement committees turned instead to preparing for war. But throughout the homes of our colonies, certainly in the homes of Rhode Island, Tables were already set with the spirit of liberty and calls for war, and tea wasn't on the menu.
Thank you, Morgan. And Morgan never disappoints. And I always learn something that I did not know or didn't think about. So I appreciate that. At this time, I would like to call forward Ann L. Harrigan, the State Regent of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And you know, I was honored in 2008 as the Rhode Island Daughters of the American Revolution History Teacher of the Year. And so that has always been something that I've been incredibly proud of, and I'm very, very happy to have you here today. And the work that your organization does mean so much to preserving our history. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, of course, to the Rhode Island Historical Society and to the Rhode Island 250th Commission for getting this commemoration together and inviting me here to speak. Thank you to my fellow DAR members and to the Children of the American Revolution for your contributions today as well. What an honor it is to be here today to mark this important moment in history. In case you aren't familiar with the Daughters of the American Revolution or only know us from the Gilmore Girls, let me talk briefly. We are a nonprofit, non-political community service organization with just shy of about 200,000 active members all around the world, and over 1 million members since the founding of the society in 1890. The DAR is a group of women working together to promote historic preservation, education, and patriotism as a way to honor the service and sacrifices of our ancestors during the fight for independence. One of the first things that the Rhode Island State Society did after being founded in the 1890s was actually to place a plaque in Market Square. I know we're not out there today. Please imagine me gesturing proudly at the plaque behind me. The next time you're in Market Square, please stop, take a look, and read the plaque. The plaque was placed in 1894 to honor the people who participated in the Providence Tea Party. Even back then, the DAR did not want people to forget about our state's participation in the founding of our country and wanted to ensure that women remained a part of the story. The plaque specifically mentions women. Women's historical contributions are largely underreported, and we have to work really hard sometimes to find the proof of who they were and what they did. What makes this particular event stand out when compared to events such as the Boston Tea Party is that women are first and foremost on this night. And they didn't wear costumes and dress in disguises. The show of resistance to unjust practices were vital in stirring support from the colonies to unite and declare their independence, which of course we did here in Rhode Island first. But women didn't just participate in these precursors to war, they also served on the front line. Most of our knowledge of their service is due to letters written home by soldiers to their mothers after discovering that they were actually serving with women and didn't even know. These discoveries were usually made only after she had been killed in action and fellow soldiers were removing the uniforms and supplies so that others could use them. These seemingly innocent letters are actual proof that women have been a part of all of this and proudly serving since the beginning. Over 3 million women have served this country since the American Revolution. I am so proud to be here today, 250 years after this event and 131 years after our organization placed this plaque to reaffirm our appreciation for these men and women who decided that something was not right and had the courage to do something about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. Next, I'd like to introduce Representative Catherine Kazarian, my former colleague in the House of Representatives, and you spoke, Ann, about courageous women. And Representative Kazarian ran in her early 20s and has ascended to the number 3 position in the Rhode Island House of Representatives. She has been integral in passing key legislation regarding voting access. She was the author of the Let Rhode Island Vote Act and legislation that mandates Holocaust and genocide remembrance in Rhode Island's public schools. It is my tremendous honor to introduce Representative Catherine Kazarian.
right. Good morning, everyone, or I guess almost good afternoon. First, I want to thank our Secretary of State, Greg Amore, the entire 250 committee, including Lauren Fogarty, Dr. Steve Morgan Greff from the Rhode Island Historical Society, Ann L. Harrington, our state regent from the Daughters of the American Revolution, and Mary Frances Cooper from the Providence League of Women Voters for hosting today's event and for inviting me to participate. As the Secretary just said, my name is Catherine Kazarian, and I am proud to serve as the Rhode Island State Representative for District 63 in East Providence and Pawtucket, and as the House Majority Whip. I am honored and grateful to serve in both of these roles that are centered around helping people and our state to be the best place that it can be. Today, we have gathered to remember the Providence Tea Party of 1775, which was quite the historical event, though it is curiously omitted from the dominant narrative around the American Revolution. It is incredible to think about how this group of women organized a public protest to challenge the oppressive British government that still ruled in 1775. Thinking back, a protest of that scale and power could have only been organized by a group of women who were brave, creative, and collaborative. While learning about their story and reflecting on the challenges that they faced, I couldn't help but be reminded of another group of women that I know, the present-day women who serve alongside me in the Rhode Island General Assembly. As the Majority Whip, who has been serving as a state representative for over a decade, I have been uniquely able to bear witness to, participate in, and advocate for the undertakings of the bold women with whom I serve, and I'd like to share some of their achievements with all of you now. Representatives Susan Donovan and Kathleen Fogarty, who's here with us today, championed the passage of the Pay Equity Act, which ensures that all women are paid the same as men for the same type of work. Representatives Lauren Carson, Terry Cortrand, and Michelle McGaugh sponsored the Act on Climate legislation, which has helped our state to take significant steps to combat climate change. Representatives Edie Agello, Karen Alzate, and Teresa Tanzi have all advocated for legislation that would enshrine a woman's right to access health care in Rhode Island. Representatives Justine Caldwell, Jennifer Boylan, and Carol McEntee have worked together to pass legislation that would make our communities safer and to end gun violence. Representatives Pat Serpa, Deb Falella, Mia Ackerman, and Charlene Lima have worked on legislation to help our seniors age comfortably and gracefully in our state. Representatives Grace Diaz, Mary Messier, and Marian Shawcroft-Smith have all sponsored legislation to address our children's needs, including access to nutritional food, education, and after-school care. Representatives Leonella Felix, Cherie Cruz, and Julie Casimiro have advocated for the passage of prison reforms and the rehabilitation of our citizens after they have served their time and are working to reintegrate into society. Representatives Rebecca Kislak and Megan Cotter are both strong proponents for funding public transportation. Together, they have worked to educate our leaders on the different types of transportation we should offer and their distinctive benefits. Representatives June Speakman, Jenny Furtado, and Jennifer Stewart have all championed legislation around housing to help Rhode Islanders find a place to live that is safe, clean, and affordable. And finally, Representatives Tina Spears, Jacqueline McGinsky, Cherie Roberts, and Marie Hopkins have worked together to expand access to quality healthcare and modern technology within our state. The women of Rhode Island's government of today are so many things, but most importantly, like the women who staged the Providence Tea Party protest in 1775, they are collaborative. They are welcoming and warm. They are understanding of each other's strengths. They firmly believe in the power of working together. No matter how bleak our future may appear, we, the women of this state, will work together, as we have always done, to address our challenges and think of new ways to solve our issues. I am inspired by the dedication of my colleagues, and I am unbelievably proud to work alongside them. Together, let's remember the spirit of the women who championed the Providence Tea Party of 1775 and continue to use their story to help us work together towards a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kazarian. One of the benefits, I believe, of the RI 250 Commission is to unite Rhode Islanders, and America 250 to unite Americans at what is a divided time in our nation's history. And Representative Kazarian read down a list of accomplishments that was entirely bipartisan. And I think that's something we should focus on as Americans, the things that we share, the values that we share, that we have much more in common than we do in opposition to one another. And I think the RI-250 Commission is a great opportunity to share what is America and what the founding principles are and what the Declaration of Independence talked about and the preamble of the Constitution. These are things that make us Americans. It is not our religion or our political affiliation. It is not our gender. It is not our ideology. It is the Constitution. It is the Declaration of Independence that unites us as Americans. And I think Representative Kazarian did a nice job today in highlighting the accomplishments of the many women in Rhode Island state government. And finally, today, our final speaker, before we symbolically burn some tea, is Mary Frances Cooper, a board member of the League of Women Voters of Providence. And I can tell you that the Rhode Island Department of State is so proud to collaborate with the League of Women Voters on so many initiatives. And the League has done for many, many years what is so important, which is engaging community members in participation in their communities, whether it be political or otherwise. And so I'm proud to introduce Mary Frances Cooper.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you everyone for being here today and for all of your contributions to this work that I think we are all doing together. Like the representative, I want to take a through line to those amazing women 250 years ago to today who burned that tea and come to today, to what we can all do together to contribute to our society. So the League of Women Voters, if you don't know, is a nonpartisan national organization with state and local chapters. It was founded in 1920, just as the 19th Amendment, which was the Women's Suffrage Amendment, was being ratified. Because so many women had worked so hard to get the vote over the years, there was an awful lot of energy and enthusiasm and experience and infrastructure in place that could be built upon to inform, encourage, and support women in exercising this new right. It was in her address to the National American Women's Suffrage Association 50th convention. 50 years they worked on this. In St. Louis, Missouri, the President Carrie Chapman Catt proposed the creation of a League of Women Voters to finish the fight and aid in the reconstruction of the nation. The next year, on February 14th, 1920, Valentine's Day, 6 months before the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, the League was formally organized in Chicago as the National League of Women Voters. Rhode Island was actually one of the first states to organize a chapter right here in Providence. Sarah Algeo, a tireless suffragist and advocate for women, was instrumental in establishing the League in Rhode Island. In Providence, one of the League's first activities was to organize free civic education classes after registering women now eligible to vote. The 1920 presidential election was less than 2.5 months away when the 19th Amendment was signed, so they had their work cut out for them. But from the beginning, it was very apparent that voter education should extend to all people, not just women. And to this day, the League of Women Voters in Rhode Island works to encourage all who are eligible to register to vote. We participate in voter registration drives, table at communities, and we attend naturalization ceremonies to register new citizens as soon as they take their oath and receive their official documentation. At the League, we also believe that voters should be aware of candidates and issues for each election, so we sponsor or moderate candidate forums. We sponsor or co-sponsor information sessions on topics such as climate change, sustainability, immigration, the judiciary, K-12 education, and more. Then we have to encourage, once everybody's registered and they're informed, they've got to vote, right? That is the most important thing. And when I table at events and I say to people, do you want to register to vote? Oh, I'm already registered. If there's an election coming up, I look them in the eye and I say, and you're going to vote, right? So I think if they tell me that, maybe they will. We know how hard it is. We know how hard people's lives are, and sometimes it's just not easy to figure it in the day. And so that's why a huge part of our advocacy is making sure that voting is easy and accessible and people can participate in a way that's meaningful to them. And then once the candidates are elected, we believe civic engagement is a priority. These are people who've been elected to represent us, and so it is incumbent on each of us to be sure that our elected officials at all levels know where we stand on the issues, regardless of whether we fundamentally agree with one another's positions. I have heard from legislators, you tell me, if you get 4 or 5 or 6 letters, you know there's a lot more people out there who believe that way, and it starts to impact your thinking. So you've got to make your voice heard. We encourage voters to attend a town hall or community meeting, write letters, emails, and call their representatives to give input. And if you like what they do, call on them and tell them that too, because that matters. Listen, democracy is something that we all do together. Government is only good government if we all do our part. This is something that all of those amazing, powerful, and admirable women that we know down through the years believed, and we owe to them to take what they built, steward, shepherd, and involve it as necessary to the best of our ability, and then hand it off to the next generation so they can have the advantages that we have and hopefully add more. That's what I believe. That's why I am a member of the League of Women Voters. And that's why I would encourage you to join us as well. And you don't have to be a woman. Men can join as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Just a reminder before we do the symbolic burning of the tea. I hope you'll stay around and engage with our speakers today and connect with efforts around the RI 250 programming. Tuesday, March 4th, across the hall in the stateroom, we have a fantastic event where we will be bringing in a portrait that has been at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia up until now. It has arrived in Rhode Island. It's Brave Men as Ever Fought. It highlights the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, the first integrated regiment in American history. It's a fantastic opportunity to hear historians speak about the role of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment and take a look at this beautiful, beautiful portrait. And again, I have to thank our RI 250 team, which is Lauren Fogarty, with the support of our state, our Department of State team, and in particular Faith Chybowski. So I would encourage you to attend that event as well. I want to acknowledge the Girl Scouts as well here today. And I know Representative Fogarty, who was mentioned, came in a little later. I want to acknowledge her as well. So at this point, I'm going to call upon Oliver Head, the National Government Studies Chair of the Children of the American Revolution, to lead us in the burning of the tea.
To thank everyone here for coming and commemorating this historical event. And we now invite you to throw your replica tea boxes into our pyre.